Revenge films.
My name is Hillary Smith. Ever since I was a little girl, I've always dreamed of becoming a school teacher. And now, that dream came true, and it's been 4 years since I've been a teacher. I got married 2 years ago to my husband, Michael, and I'm currently about to enter my 9th month of pregnancy. I wanted to work right up until the last month, and I had my maternity leave just ahead of me. However, there was one thing that really worried me, and that is a certain student in my class who was not only a problem student, but also a troubled child. That student's name was Richard, and his father was the vice president of a very major company that was famous around the country. Everybody was afraid of the power that he had. And that's why, despite what a terrible student Richard was, none of the other teachers were able to scold him for any of it. Everybody knew that Richard had done such bad things that he was arrested. But his father paid such a large amount of hush money that he was able to brush it all under the rug. I always had a strong sense of justice, so I didn't pay any mind to the power that Richard's father had. Anytime that I would see Richard doing something wrong, I didn't show any mercy and I scolded him for it. And because of that, it was obvious that Richard really did not like me. But there was a reason why I was so strict on Richard and insisted on scolding him. And that was because of something that happened back when I was in high school. I had a childhood best friend that I had been close to since we were in elementary school, named Rachel. However, the moment we started high school, she started speeding down the wrong path. I knew that Rachel's parents had just gotten divorced and that everything in her household had just fallen apart. I could tell that because of the stress of that, that's why she started going down the wrong path. Because I knew how difficult her situation at home was, I wasn't able to say anything about her problematic actions. The only thing that I could do, despite being right next to her, was to watch her tear her life apart and pretend like I didn't see anything. As a result of that, when we were juniors in high school, she ended up causing an incident that inflicted damage, and she was arrested and sent off to a juvenile center. She had to drop out of high school, and I knew that she always had a dream of becoming a preschool teacher, but she also had to give up on that. When I think about the fact that I could have said something back then, and maybe her life would have ended up differently, I was left with nothing but regret. And I didn't want to repeat the same mistake of watching somebody destroy their life at such a young age. And that's why, now that I'm a teacher, no matter how small the problematic act may be, I couldn't pretend not to see it in any of my students. That was my motto as an educator. When it came to Richard, his problematic actions only continued to escalate, and there were rumors around the school about the bad things he was doing. And that's why I decided to stay until the very last minute of my maternity leave so that I could watch over him. But then one day, I overheard the students in the hallways gossiping and saying, "Doesn't it smell like cigarette smoke around here?" I immediately noticed the smell, and I tried to follow it to the source. I was able to track down the smell to the science room, and when I got there, I opened the door. I wasn't surprised to find that Richard was in there, alone, boldly smoking a cigarette inside of the classroom. I immediately scolded him. "Richard, what are you doing? You need to stop that immediately!" But his response to me was,
"Oh, it's you again. Whatever. If you want to tell the principal, then go ahead. My dad's gonna take care of it anyway. There's nothing you can do."
And he laughed at me. I then grabbed the cigarette out of Richard's mouth and said strongly to him, "Even if you try to erase this from the records, I am not gonna let it happen." Richard was furious, and before I could react, he lunged forward at me, yelling, and jumped on top of me. And then he started yelling,
"Oh, that's right. You're pregnant, aren't you? I forgot about that. So I wonder what's gonna happen if I punch you in the stomach. What's gonna happen to that baby?"
he said as he started raising his fist. I desperately yelled, "Stop it, Richard, stop!" And I tried to defend myself, but he was a high school boy, and with full force, he punched me right in the stomach. And then he got up and laughed.
"Take that! This is what happens when you try to go against me. Do you understand now? You better not forget it!"
And then he stormed out of the science room. At that very moment, I looked down and I realized that my water had broken. I tried to yell out for help, but my consciousness was quickly fading, and before I could get a word out, I had passed out on the floor. By the time I woke up, I was laying down in a hospital bed, and the first thing I did was reach down and touch my stomach. and I realized that the baby wasn't there anymore. I was so overwhelmed with worry and devastation that I immediately started crying. But that was when my husband ran over to me and he comforted me.
Hillary, you're awake! Thank goodness! Don't worry, there's no need to cry. The baby was born and she's safe and healthy.
And he came by my side and patted me on the head. When I heard that, I was so relieved that I cried even harder. And for a while, I couldn't stop crying while my husband held me. I then found out that when I was carried in an ambulance to the hospital, both myself and the baby were in critical condition. We were put through emergency surgery, and the doctors were fortunately able to save both of our lives. Because the baby was born over a month before her expected due date, I was really worried, but they said that even though she was a little bit small, there were no major concerns to her health. After I was able to see my baby and had finally calmed down from the whole situation, my husband sat down with me and asked me to tell him everything that happened in detail. And so I told him everything that I remembered about what Richard did to me in the school. My husband was beyond furious.
We need to talk to the school and have them call his parents. He needs to take responsibility for what he's done,
he said. I also thought that it would be the best thing to do, so as soon as I was discharged from the hospital and I felt better, I went to visit the school. However, when I went straight to the principal and explained the situation to him, his response was disappointing, as expected.
You already know this, but even if we talk to his parents, they're just going to pay hush money and brush it under the rug.
However, my husband said that even if that's the case, it's fine. He just wanted to speak to them. And so the principal arranged for Richard and his father to be brought into the office. The next day in the principal's office, we began the discussion with Richard, his father, the principal, my husband, and myself. But the first thing Richard's father said to us was,
"So, how much money do you want out of this? I'm sure things must be difficult for you since you just gave birth to a baby, so I'm happy to pay whatever you need."
But I responded, "I don't want your hush money. I plan on submitting a report to the police for the assault." When I said that, Richard chimed in.
Oh, please, come on. You know who my father is, right? I know the principal definitely knows.
And then he turned and looked right at the principal, and then the principal looked uncomfortable and responded,
Well, yes, we are receiving quite a large donation to the school from your father, Richard, so we will make this a settlement.
And then next, Richard's father had a confident look on his face and handed us his business card and said,
You see, I'm actually the vice president of a very famous company. You may know it. That's why it's easy for me to brush something like this under the rug. So how much do you want?
I took the business card and I looked at it. But at that very moment, my husband and I locked eyes. And then I smiled and responded to Richard's father. Well, isn't that interesting? Are you sure about that? Because my father-in-law is the CEO of this company. As soon as I said that, the entire air in the room changed. Richard's father went pale and silent, and my husband looked at him and said,
Isn't that a coincidence? I didn't think that you were working underneath my father. Nice to meet you.
And then Richard started throwing a tantrum.
That's definitely a lie! If you're his son, then why aren't you working at that company? My father would know you then!
But Michael calmly replied,
I didn't just want to leech off of my parents. That's why I didn't rely on my father's power. And I studied really hard in school for myself. As a result of that, I was able to make my dream come true ever since I was a little kid of becoming a doctor. And now that's exactly what I've become, and that's why I'm not going to take after my father's company. With that being said, now that I know that the vice president is such a horrible person, there's no way that I can stay quiet about this and let it go.
And then he immediately pulled out his cell phone. And then in front of everybody, he called his father and he explained the full situation. Richard's father started to panic and yelled out,
Please, wait, it's not what it sounds like. Sir, this is all a misunderstanding.
He was desperately trying to defend himself. But my father-in-law had been looking forward to the birth of his first grandchild more than anybody. So of course he was furious. Especially because Richard's father was his vice president and he trusted him. Now that he found out what he was like behind his back, Michael's father seemed even more livid. And when he found out that Richard's father was donating a large sum of money to the school and erasing all of his son's problems, my father-in-law didn't hesitate to report them to the police himself. And then the police showed up soon after to the school, and they arrested Richard and his father. I also went to the police station and explained the whole situation to them, and after discussing it with my husband, we submitted an official report. What Richard did was not something that could be forgiven, and in order to ensure that he would never repeat the same thing in the future, it was decided that he would be taken away. Soon after that, thanks to my father-in-law acting on it, they launched an investigation into the Teachers Association of the school. And after a survey taken amongst the students and the employees, it was discovered that the principal was taking money from Richard's father and helping to erase all of his wrongdoings. Of course, the principal was fired, and he disappeared from the school. As for Richard, it wasn't just his assault towards me, but a number of other illegal and problematic actions were discovered, and he was ultimately sent off to a juvenile center. And after this incident, Richard's father was demoted from vice president to just a regular employee at the company. When he was regulated to an office far out in the countryside, I heard that he resigned. After that, because of the incident that Richard caused and all of the settlements that they had to pay, their family had to give up all of their assets. And in the end, they weren't able to survive and had to sell their house. Even though Richard's father was so against the relegation to the suburbs that he would quit his job, these days I heard that he moved out to the countryside and is living in hiding. A few months after that, I received a letter from Richard from the juvenile center. After some exchange, he opened up to me, and he was actually under a lot of stress and pressure from his parents and didn't know what to do with it. In the letter, he said that after he heard my husband's story, he realized just how much he was using his father's power, and for the first time, he felt embarrassed about it. He then said that once he gets out of the juvenile center, he wants to become independent as soon as possible and leave his parents. When I read all of this, I decided that I wanted to meet him as soon as he came out of the juvenile center. And I was glad that I didn't just listen to the principal and that I submitted a police report after the incident. Every day, our baby girl is growing healthy. And even though there's a part of me that has a hard time forgiving Richard for what he did, I also realize that I need to think about how to raise my daughter as a parent as well. Regardless of what happened, I am so grateful that my daughter was born healthy, and from now on, I'm going to devote all of my love to her and try to raise her as best as I can. I'm Jen, a stay-at-home mom. I live with my husband Omar, his mother Ashanti, and our 2-year-old daughter. I'm fortunate to have met such kind people who became my family, but this is my second marriage. My first marriage was so traumatic that I couldn't even talk about it for a while, but Omar and Ashanti rescued me from it. I met my first husband, Bill, at work. We started dating and got married in a few months. We moved into his parents' house, and I was busy juggling work and housework, but Bill and his mother, Sophia, were hard on me. Every day they would say to me,
"You're a wife. Don't cut corners on your responsibilities here."
When it came to my father-in-law,
"Are you not pregnant yet? If you're not doing well with Bill, why don't you have my baby instead?"
He would often tell me a creepy joke like this. The harassment got worse day by day, and Sophia would say, "When are you going to get pregnant? Oh, what a worthless woman." Even though we hadn't even been married for a year, Bill called me infertile and said,
"I shouldn't have married you. What's the point of having a wife who can't have children?"
Then he would threaten to divorce me. I took this verbal abuse daily and was depressed all the time. Still, I couldn't go back to my parents so soon. We were married only a few months then. I thought I should be patient. Our parents' houses were relatively close and in the countryside. They knew each other like relatives, but Sophia spread bad words about me to the neighbors, calling me stupid and childless. It didn't take long for it to get back to my parents. My parents called me one day, worried about me.
"Are things not going well with you?"
As if the water balloon couldn't take any more water, I burst into tears. "If it's too hard for you, you can come back here." I thanked them for their concern, but I decided to try to be patient a little longer. A week later, when I got home from work, Bill yelled at me.
You're too late. Go make dinner now.
I fixed the dinner quickly and served it to them, but they said,
Ugh, it's disgusting. I can't eat this. Go order some sushi from your pocket.
I just did what he told me, but when it was delivered, "You'll eat what you cooked. This is only for us." I was sad and crying while I was taking a bath. I didn't understand why they always treated me that way. Then suddenly my father-in-law tried to open the bathroom door. I pushed the door back reflexively to stop him from coming in. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said,
I'll wash you.
I refused and kept pushing the door back, but he was strong. "Please, stop!" I was crying loudly. Sophia heard me and came over. "So he saw you naked. What's the big deal? You're not a teenager." I said, "It is a big deal." The words just came out of my mouth. "What did you just say? Are you talking back to me?" At that point, I was sure I couldn't be there anymore. I ran out of the bathroom and got dressed quickly, and I just ran away. I ran to my parents' house and told them what had happened, crying. And they said that I don't have to put up with it anymore, but just get a divorce. A few days later, I went to meet my husband and in-laws along with my parents, but they didn't admit to the incident and said I was overreacting. Bill said I was mentally unstable and wrote that in the divorce papers, but we agreed on getting a divorce anyway. After that, Sophia spread more bad words about me in the neighborhood, and all seemed to believe her story and pointed their fingers at me. I couldn't stay in the town and moved out to the city and found a job. A year passed, and I started to see someone I met at work. 2 years later, we got married. My second husband, Omar, grew up in South Africa and moved here recently when his mother, Ashanti, was transferred for work. Ashanti and her husband got a divorce when Omar was little, and she raised Omar as a single mother. Omar wanted to live with his mother even after he gets married. I was afraid of living with in-laws at first because of my past trauma. But when I met Ashanti, I thought she was a good person. She was not two-faced and treated me really nicely. I liked her instinctively and decided to make Omar's wish come true. After we got married, we got along nicely and there was no problems among us. I got pregnant soon after we married, and a year later, we became a family of 4. I gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. Ashanti helped me a lot to raise my baby. One day, I got a call from my dad. A relative passed away, and he wanted me to attend the funeral. I didn't want to go visit the town, but it had been 5 years now, I said to myself. It would be okay. Knowing everything that had happened to me in my hometown, Omar and Ashanti were concerned and came with me for emotional support. My parents were happy to see their grandchild. The funeral went smoothly, and we didn't encounter any problems until we came back to the house and had dinner. Bill and my ex-in-laws showed up at the door. They said they had acquainted the deceased and came to pay their respects. When I saw them, my horrible memories were coming back, and I was panic-attacked and couldn't move. Sophia said to my father, "It's been a while. Is that your immature daughter sitting over there? After what she did to my son, how could she show her face in this town again?" She continued, "She even tried to seduce my husband, but when found out, she ran away with her tail between her legs. She couldn't cook, didn't do the housework, and she couldn't even have a child, but she married my son. That was a marriage fraud." She glared at me and cursed, but Omar was done listening to her nonsense and stood up. Ashanti then gave him a motion to stop and stood in front of Bill. "Thank you for divorcing Jen. She's a great cook and does the housework well, kind-hearted, and the best daughter-in-law in the world." She said all this with a big smile, and the in-laws couldn't say anything more. Now it's my parents' turn to speak up. They corrected Sophia's fake stories and told everybody what actually had happened to me. Then Sophia said to my parents, "It's your fault, too. How could you let your infertile daughter marry someone?" So I said, "I have my child." Sophia seemed surprised. "What? How come?" The in-laws and Bill noticed everybody's eyes were on them and fled. After that, the abuse they had done to me was out in the open, and people who misunderstood came to apologize to us. Rumor has it that Bill remarried, but his new wife didn't get pregnant either, so he treated her the same way he did me. But when he saw the child in my arms, he had a doubt for the first time and went to the hospital to check up on himself. The test revealed that it was he who was sterile. When his wife found out, she was angry and divorced him. The in-laws said, "So it was you after all? If you can't have a child, you're a failure as a man." Then Bill contacted me and said,
I had no idea you had my child. Mom said she would forgive you, so just come back and I'll remarry you.
"Are you crazy? What makes you think she's your child?" Then he said,
Then we can just pretend she's my child. Mom's so mad at me because I'm sterile. Remarry me, please.
"Didn't you see my daughter? She's mixed race." Then he finally seemed to recognize his ridiculous proposal and left. Now he felt he's all alone and he couldn't be at home anymore, left the house, left work, and disappeared. No one knows where he went, but his parents received Bill's credit card bill every month. The neighbors stopped talking to them and they had frequent visits from a debt collector. They became haggard and barely left the house. They live on welfare, and it was unfortunate that they had to pay for their son's debt, but they deserved it, and no one helped them. My parents later told me that the neighbors had heard so much bad-mouthing of me and realized my ex-in-laws were pathological liars. I'm sure they will have no social life in their future. After that, it became easier for me to pop up in my hometown without worrying about false reputation, and I got to see my parents more often. Their relationship with neighbors has also been restored, and they seem happier than before. I no longer suffer from my past dark memories, and I think I've overcome my trauma. Omar and Ashanti played a big role in this, and we got even closer. We love and trust each other, and I finally found my happiness.
I'm Corey, working full-time and living with my wife, Amy, and our son, Lyle. Amy and I were doing well some time after we got married, but after Lyle was born, she became somewhat distant. I thought it came from the stress of childcare at first, but now I'm convinced it wasn't. One day, she went out for a class reunion and came home late. The following day, when she was taking a bath, her phone kept ringing. It was loud, so I glanced at the screen. The message read, "It was fun last night. Let's stay over next time." It was from a guy called Steve. My instinct told me that she was cheating on me. I was upset for a moment and didn't think of taking a photo or anything. I just looked away from it, and I asked Amy straight when she was out of the bath, "Who's Steve?" And she said,
"Did you look at my phone? What a jerk!"
She blamed me for looking at her phone and denied the affair completely. She insisted that Steve was one of her guy friends during high school, but my suspicion didn't go away. Amy became even colder to me and Lyle and went out at night more frequently. My doubt was growing stronger, and one day I told my childhood friend Jimmy about it. Jimmy is 29 years old and still enjoys his bachelor's life. I wasn't sure if he could understand the problem of this kind, but I couldn't tell anybody else. I asked him out for a drink before the weekend and asked him what he thinks of this, and he said, "It's not suspicious, it's a sure thing." What was she like? She didn't seem like that type, at least at the wedding. I showed him a photo of Amy, and he said, "Have I seen her somewhere recently? But I can't remember." I asked him to think hard, but he couldn't recall anything at that time. Thinking about what he said, I was no longer suspicious but convinced. I started paying more attention to her whereabouts. One day, I left work early. It was Lyle's birthday, so I bought a whole cake and hurried home. But when I got home, Amy was getting ready to go out. I said, "You're not going out today, are you?"
"My friend needs to see me, so I'm stepping out."
I could no longer be quiet. "You don't remember what day it is today? It's Lyle's birthday! What could be more important than that?"
"But you're home now. Birthdays come every year. This year, you two can celebrate it together. What's the big deal?"
I couldn't believe her words and didn't know what to say to that. I just gave her the cold stare, but she seemed like she couldn't care less and dressed nicely and left. Lyle, seeing his mommy leaving, "My present? Did Mommy forget my birthday?" I couldn't bear to see my son and ordered in his favorite pizza, hoping he would cheer up a little. A half hour later, the doorbell rang, so I thought it was pizza delivery and opened the door, but found my mother-in-law, Joanne, there instead. She looked exhausted and said,
"Amy doesn't answer the phone. Is she here?"
So I told her she stepped out a little while ago.
"Well, her father passed away this morning."
I was shocked to hear the news. She said that he collapsed at home this morning and she called an ambulance. He was brought to a hospital but didn't regain consciousness. It was sudden, but my brother-in-law, Freddie, and his wife and other relatives were rushed to the hospital, and Amy was the only one she couldn't reach, she said. I called her too, but she didn't answer. Taking Lyle with me, I drove her back to her house anyway. While I was driving, I got a call from Jimmy. Since I was driving, I put the phone on speaker. "Hey, Corey, are you with your wife right now?" he asked me bluntly, and I said, "No, but why?" "I think I just saw your wife on the street. She had her arm around a man." I told him what was going on here and asked him if he could tail them to see what they were up to. Listening in on our conversation, Joanne got a good idea of what had been going on our end, and she started crying.
"I'm ashamed of my daughter."
She was sobbing in a car, but when she got home, she cried out loud. Freddie saw her and asked, "What's going on?" I was thinking about how to bring it up, and Joanne went ahead and told everybody about Amy's adultery. Freddie was furious to hear that and urged me to go there with him to where Jimmy saw her and her lover, Steve. I left Lyle with Joanne and went over to confront Amy with Freddie. When we got to the area, we caught Amy and Steve just about to go into a hotel. Freddie just came up to them, grabbed Amy's arm, and yelled at her. "What the hell are you doing? Dad passed away today!"
What? What are you talking about? Dad passed? What happened?
She looked shocked, looking back and forth between me and Freddie. "You two come with me." Then Freddie pushed Amy and Steve, who was going to run away, into his car and drove back. When we got back home, Amy finally understood the situation and sat down in a daze. Seeing Amy and Steve, Joanne came up to her and said,
"You are not my daughter anymore."
And slapped her in the face. Amy sank into a chair and begged.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Everybody there had a thing to say to her. After hearing all, she was shut out of the house. Just before leaving, she grabbed my arm and said,
What did you tell them?
So I said, "Does it matter? But remember, you'll be hearing from my lawyer and I'll get custody of Lyle." Then she said,
Wait a minute. Are you going to divorce me?
"How can I not?"
Wait, you can't decide everything yourself. Let's talk about it.
She changed from her bullish attitude and started pleading. But my mind was made up, and I didn't even want to look at her. I demanded the house key from her and just said, "I'll send your stuff to wherever you'll be. Your lover's place, maybe?" And I pushed her hands away. Her family decided to cut ties with her, and she didn't show up at her dad's funeral. After the funeral, Joanne told me,
"I won't ask you to forgive Amy, but I don't want to lose my grandson."
After some thinking, I decided not to take Lyle's grandmother away from him, since Joanne and Freddie were people with common sense, and it was solely Amy's fault. As for Amy, she was beyond help. I sorted everything out and broke off my relationship with her after I received the compensation. After we divorced, she started living with Steve, but their compensations piled up to $40,000, and naturally, they were in debt. When they were just having a fling, it was no strings attached, and there was passion between them. But being in debt and forced to live frugally, they started arguing, and the thrill and passion quickly cooled down. When she was kicked out of his place, she called me up crying and apologized.
I want to see you and Lyle.
That didn't change my mind slightly. I flatly refused and blocked her. I don't know what happened to her afterward. She had already lost contact with her family, and nobody knows where she is now. Joanne told me she called her once for something, but she said her number was no longer good. I moved to the location between my parents and Joanne, and I'm raising Lyle with their help. As he grew, he learned to be independent, and he can take care of most things by himself now. I don't feel stressed after the divorce, and I'm having a good life with my son. Jimmy wants me to meet someone new, but I feel fulfilled with my work and my son. I don't have the desire to meet a woman. I'm very happy with my life with my son now, and I hope he will feel the same when he leaves me one day.
I'm Leah, an ordinary housewife. When I was 23 years old, I got married to Matt, my high school sweetheart. Around the same time, Matt's brother, Nico, also got married, and we started seeing each other often at their parents' house. But then I gradually began to feel uncomfortable around my sister-in-law, Elizabeth. She was stingy and became a different person when it came to money. She would always ask me the price of my clothes and accessories, like, "How much was it?" I wasn't offended that much, but the other day when we were preparing dinner together, she asked me abruptly, "How much is Matt making?" I was stunned to hear that. Nobody boldly asked me that before. She went on, "How much are you spending on food every month?" And, "How much do you guys have in savings?" All about household finances. I just smiled and didn't answer. "If you don't want to tell me, you must have quite a lot. I'm jealous." And she said, "Nico wouldn't let me handle the money. I have no money to spend on myself." And she said she wanted to talk to me about it sometime privately and asked me for my number. A week later, she sent me a text and wanted to have lunch. When I got to the place of her choice, it was a fancy restaurant that Matt and I would rarely go to. Being a housewife, I was reluctant to have lunch at such a place on a weekday, but Elizabeth was already seated, so I went in. When she saw me, she said, "I already ordered a full course for us. The food is really good here." She seemed excited. When the food was brought out one by one, everything looked high-end, and I hesitated even more. But I couldn't put a stop halfway through the full course, so I just ate it all. I felt sorry for Matt and barely remembered what she talked about. When I saw the bill, it was $50 each. I was going to pay for myself, and Elizabeth said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I left my wallet at home. Can you pay for me, please? I'll pay you back later." "What?" I said reflexively. She said, "I'll pay you back, I promise." So I did what she asked me to. I wanted to talk to Matt about this, but I felt guilty for eating such a nice lunch while he was working, and I couldn't bring it up. A week passed, and Elizabeth sent me a message and invited me to lunch again. She said she would pay me back. So I suggested we go to a more reasonable restaurant, and she chose a casual barbecue place. I felt a little better. When I got to the restaurant, Elizabeth was already there, looking into the menu intently. I ordered a sandwich, but she... "I'll have the premium barbecue plate with extra brisket and beer on tap." All were pricey. I asked her, "Will you be okay ordering that much?" But she just said, "Why not?" She ended up ordering more, totaling over $100. I was going to pay for myself, and she said, "Oh, not again. I forgot my wallet again. I'm so sorry, but will you pay for me?" This time I told her clearly, "I can't do that. I won't pay more than $100 for you." Then she said, "Do you want me to get arrested?" And she grabbed my arm. True, they will probably call the police and she would be taken away. Thinking of the family, I reluctantly paid for her too, but she hasn't even returned to me for the last time yet. She had quite a nerve. I insisted that she give me my money back before leaving. When we lived solely off Matt's income, I paid $150 on her behalf. I decided to talk honestly to Matt. That night, when I brought it up, he was surprised, naturally.
What? Did you pay that much for what she ate?
I apologized to him and was in tears, worrying about what if she didn't return the money.
Why don't you text her to see when she'll pay you back?
So I did what he suggested, but she didn't reply, although she had read it. 1 month passed without hearing from her. I realized she just used me with no intention of paying me back. I was angry. Around the same time, my in-laws planned a family gathering with several relatives. Matt and I decided to take advantage of this opportunity. When we went over the day, quite a few relatives were already there. Among them were Elizabeth and Nico. Elizabeth looked away from me. When we sat down at the table, Matt gave me a signal. As we planned, I said loudly, "Oh, I have to tell you something, Elizabeth." All the eyes were on me, and I said, "When are you going to pay me back?" Now all the eyes were on her. She said, Do you have to tell me this now?" Looking embarrassed. Then Nico said,
What's going on?
Nothing." But he continued to question her, and finally, she told him the truth. Nico asked me to tell him everything, so I did. Furiously, Nico raised his voice.
You remember that I told you I would divorce you next time you had money trouble, don't you?
Later, we found out the reason why Nico didn't allow her to use their money freely was that Elizabeth had money trouble before. She was into social media and she had to look rich, even if it meant borrowing money from others. Nico didn't know this until they got married, and he paid off her debt at that time, but declared that he would divorce her if she did it again. Despite that, she did it again, and Nico couldn't take it anymore. "I'm sorry, I won't do it again, and I'll return the money to her. Please don't divorce me."
I told you there'd be no next time. I'm filing for a divorce.
And Nico went home alone. Elizabeth, realizing everybody was looking at her, finally apologized to me and went after Nico. Elizabeth apologized to Nico a few more times, but he just handed her the divorce papers. Nico was disgusted with her personality and said there was no love left for her. Elizabeth, crying and begging him to reconsider, had no avail. Their divorce was finalized in the following month. The money I was lending was returned to me, and I never saw her again. Having been a housewife for some time, she couldn't get a job to support herself and went back to her parents' house. Her parents were not in good financial condition and lived in an old studio apartment. Elizabeth had no choice but to join them there without any privacy. Elizabeth continued to look for a job, but she didn't have any skills or experience, and her personality wasn't helping either. She didn't pass the interviews. She seems to be in the same place for some time now. Having returned my money, I was relieved after she was out of my life. Nico seems to be busy, putting himself to work after the divorce. He doesn't seem to be depressed or lonely, but rather he looks more lively than before. Elizabeth seemed to have been troublesome for him during their marriage. He may be better off now. I hope he'll meet someone decent in the future.
My name is Kevin. I lived with my father for many years, just the two of us, and he was like my best friend. My mother unfortunately passed away when my brother and I were both in college. Up until that time, my father was the owner and CEO of a company. However, because of the devastation of losing his wife, he became burnt out and was no longer able to work. And so he ended up selling his company for a pretty high cost. After that, he moved out of the city and was living quietly. By that time, I was in my late 20s, but I saw that my father was like an empty shell, and I couldn't just leave him. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time either. As for my brother, Michael, back when my father had a company, he was driving a nice car, and he was living in a luxury apartment building about an hour away in the middle of the city. But ever since my father quit his company, he must have realized that he wasn't going to be able to have all of these luxuries anymore. And without any sympathy for my father, he left town. Not long after that, my father became ill. After my mother passed away, I moved in with my father, and we were living together. After some time, he was finally starting to seem better and happier. But then we found out that he was ill and he didn't have long to live. My father looked like he was at peace with his fate, but even still, to me, he was my only father and my only parent left. I wanted to be with him until the very end of his treatment. And even if I could only go to the hospital for 5 minutes after work, I tried to go every day. As I was frequenting the hospital every day, I became friendly with the nurses as well. They would say things like, "You're a father and son that get along so well," or say things like, "You have such a kind son, you're blessed." My father would always smile and seemed happy to hear that, and it also made me happy. Amongst those nurses, there was one in particular who was in charge of my father. Her name was Michelle, and she and I became particularly friendly. Every day we would see each other at the hospital, so we started speaking a lot more. And eventually, I asked her out and we began dating. Once it was official, the two of us went to my father's hospital room together, and we informed him that we were dating. When we told him, his eyes opened wide and he looked shocked, but he also seemed super happy about it. However, unfortunately, my father's body wasn't able to beat the illness. As hard as it was to see, he only became weaker and weaker. And when the time came that he was no longer able to fight, Michelle and I stayed by my father's side the entire time. I tried calling my brother multiple times, but he wouldn't pick up the phone at all. I also sent him a lot of messages, but he ignored all of them. And then, my father passed away. In the end, he was able to see me look so happy together with Michelle, and he said that made him the happiest of all. Those were his last words before he passed. I was sobbing, and the devastation of losing my father was immense, but Michelle was there by my side and supported me through it. Not long after that, we had my father's funeral. I messaged and called my brother multiple times in regard to that as well, but he didn't come back home at all. And yet, 10 days later, out of nowhere, he showed up like nothing had happened. I was no longer able to hold it in anymore, and I yelled at my brother, asking him what he had been up to all this time and why he didn't come. But then my brother said words that made me question my own hearing. "I have nothing to do with you, so whatever. Dad died, so I know there's an inheritance somewhere. I came here for that. Now hand it over." Are you kidding me? Even though I tried to call you and I messaged you so many times, and you didn't even show up for that. You didn't even come to the funeral. What do you mean you're here for the inheritance? Oh, shut up. Anyway, I know that Dad has a pretty big inheritance somewhere. Now hurry up and call the lawyer or whatever you need to do and ask them. When my brother said that, I was so irritated that I couldn't stand it. But it's true that the lawyer had told me when my brother came back we needed to discuss the inheritance and to contact him. And so I contacted the family lawyer. And then my father's lawyer informed us that my father had left behind 2 separate things for my brother and myself. But my brother was rushing the lawyer and kept asking what that was. So first, the lawyer disclosed what my father had left behind for my brother. And that was when the lawyer said that my father had left behind $50,000 in cash for my brother. And his response was, "Are you serious? $50,000? That's it? That's nothing!" He looked upset, but the lawyer said there was no mistake about the amount written in the will. And even though Michael looked annoyed, there was nothing he could say back. However, because I had been looking after my father all of these years, my brother must have thought that maybe my father left behind more money for me. And so he stood up and demanded to know what my part of the inheritance was going to be. And he yelled at the lawyer again. And then he said that if there was more money left for me, that he would be taking it from me as the eldest son of the family. To be honest, I really didn't care much about my father's inheritance, but I decided to listen to what was left behind for me. And it turns out that my father had only left behind my grandfather's old run-down house in the middle of nowhere. When my older brother heard that, he started cracking up, holding his stomach and pointing and laughing at me. "No way! That's seriously hilarious! You didn't even get a penny left behind for you, and instead you were just given this completely worthless house for your inheritance! Man, after everything that happened, I guess it looks like I was the only one that was loved by Dad! You poor thing, Kevin! I almost feel sorry for you!" After he said that, my brother hurried to complete the handover of the inheritance, and he disappeared. Unlike my brother, it's not like I was after my father's inheritance or particularly hoped for anything, but when my brother said that I wasn't loved by my father, to be honest, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. But now that I had the house that I had lived in with my father for years, I decided to take this opportunity to clean it up and organize it now that my father had passed. And so, in order to start cleaning up my father's personal belongings, I went around to the old storage room that was behind the house. I really need to organize this. It's a mess back here. Back in the storage room, there were all kinds of old miscellaneous items that my father owned. I remembered that my father had told me when he was still alive that if I was going to get rid of any of his things, there was somebody I had to contact to do so. And so I contacted the person he'd mentioned and had him come straight away. The man came over and we went through all of the items in the storage and organized it and got rid of things. To my surprise, the man gathered up a number of my father's items and he asked me if he could take them home with him. I couldn't understand why or what he was going to do with them, but there was nothing in particular that I needed in there. So I agreed and let him take it. And then, 3 days later, I got a phone call from that man and he asked me to meet him. That was when I heard the most shocking words I never could have imagined. "Kevin, to tell you the truth, I've known your father for a very long time. We go way back. And he had told me that one day his son would call me to organize the items in storage, and he asked me to help you out when the time came. And then he told me to look for anything that would have some value and turn all of that into cash and hand that cash directly to you." What? My father said that? I was shocked about this because I've never heard anything about it. But I was about to be even more shocked just after this. You see, your father had a hobby, and that was to collect historical items that have a high value. So, I found those items, and in the end, this is what your father has left behind for you." As he said that, he passed over a check to me, but I couldn't believe my eyes. Written on the check was $500,000. I thought that this must be some kind of joke, because there was no way that I could believe that this is real. I couldn't believe that all of those strange items that were in the storage were things that had this much value. The man apparently had also heard about my older brother, and even though he looked disappointed as he talked about it, he said that my father must have seen right through my brother's personality, and that's why my father left that house and everything in it to me. I told him that this was too much money and there was no way that I could accept it. But my father's friend told me that until the very end, he was so proud of me and that he was happy to see me happy with Michelle. Because this was the last thing that he could do for me, apparently my father said that if I refused to accept the money, to convince me no matter what. I was so overwhelmed by my feelings towards my father that, as embarrassing as it was, I ended up crying out loud in front of this man. And, more than anything, I was embarrassed that, for even a brief moment, I doubted whether my father ever truly loved me or not. After that, in the end, I decided to accept this final gift from my father. And when I got back to the house, I finished cleaning up the storage room. Once my life had calmed down, I decided to propose to Michelle, who supported my father and I until the very end, and we got married. However, I don't know where my brother could have heard the rumors from, but apparently he found out about what my father had left behind for me, and he contacted me one day out of nowhere. "Hey, is it true that you got a pretty big inheritance from Dad? I heard about it. You better give me some, too." "Why should I have to give you anything, Michael? Back then, when we discussed the inheritance, you accepted yours and laughed at mine, signed the papers, and you immediately left. We both signed the papers acknowledging our respective inheritance." "Are you kidding me? The amount of money was completely different. I practically got nothing. Now hurry up and hand over the money to me." I followed the law, and I received my legal inheritance that Dad left behind for me. You have no right to complain about it, and I definitely have no intention of giving you a single penny of it. Those were my last words, and I hung up the phone on him. Of course, I didn't think that this would be the end of it, and that he would stop trying. Just as I expected, 1 week later, I received another phone call from my brother. "Where the hell are you?" Of course, that was what he was calling about. That's because where my brother had gone was an empty house where neither me nor my belongings existed. Actually, I had received one more message from my father through that friend of his, and that was that after I received this inheritance, that my brother would probably find out about it someday, and it would cause me trouble. So my father had asked his friends to advise me to move. And so that's why Michelle and I quietly packed up, and we had moved over to the next town. My brother came to an empty house, and inside of it, I could hear him throwing a fit on the other side of the phone, and he was screaming and yelling to give him the money. I explained to him that I moved, and he was furious on the other end, but I had no intention of ever getting involved with my brother ever again, and I wanted nothing to do with him. So I told him it was none of my business anymore, and I hung up the phone. According to the rumors that I heard, my brother used up the inheritance of $50,000 in the blink of an eye, and after that, he wasn't able to get out of his habits of spending so much money, and he ended up going into a massive debt. And then, because he was messing around too much, he was also fired from his company. That was when he found out that I received such an enormous inheritance, and that's probably why he called me. But I don't plan on speaking to or having anything to do with that brother anymore. These days, I heard that he lost his house and he's become homeless, scouring the parks for food. But I think he got what he deserved, and it was all karma. For the record, after Michelle and I moved, we were going to welcome a new member to our family. And that was the new life that was growing inside of Michelle. I don't think I'm going to be using my father's inheritance anytime soon, but I want to make sure that my father, watching from above, can relax and see how happy we are. I'm going to treasure this family for the rest of my life. I'm Walter. I work full-time and live with my wife, Kathy, and daughter, Rena. I work as an engineer for a well-known manufacturer that has expanded overseas, and I was pretty busy with work. When I got promoted 6 years ago, I got enough of a raise to buy a house. I planned to live happily with my family in it. But soon after we moved in, things started to change. Although Kathy was a housewife since we got married, she didn't like housework or cooking. I helped out often, but since we moved to this house, she only did things for Rena and herself and stopped doing things for me. She said the house is too large to take care of by herself, so I tried to do my share as much as I could, but she wasn't satisfied with my help and demanded more. She said,
Don't mix your laundry with ours. You wash your stuff alone. I'll do mine and Rena's.
Rena, watching her mother treat me this way, started to copy that attitude. Rena repeated what Kathy said.
Don't you mix your laundry with ours. Yours stink.
Her words were harsh, and she wasn't the lovable daughter she once was. She didn't want me to come to her school event.
Don't you ever show up at my school. You'll embarrass me.
To which Kathy agreed. I told Rena, you should watch your mouth. I'm your father. But not only did she not listen to me, but more like she despised me.
You're gross. Go away.
Kathy flashed the divorce papers whenever we argued and said,
If we divorce, I won't let you see Rena.
All I wanted was to live with my family normally, so even though I didn't feel right, I just let her have her way. Their emotional abuse towards me escalated day by day. When Rena was in her senior year of junior high, they no longer prepared dinner for me and treated me like an invisible man. One day I left work early, and when I got home, I heard my mother-in-law, Eleanor, visiting and talking in the living room. Kathy said,
I can't stand living with a man like that every day. He's just a sad, unattractive, middle-aged man. He makes good money, so I don't plan on getting a divorce, but I wish he would go somewhere, like a position in a rural area.
And Rena ganged up.
He's disgusting. I wish he would disappear.
And laughed. Then Eleanor cut in.
What are you two thinking of him? He's a breadwinner. Bad things will happen to you if you don't treat him nicer.
But Kathy and Rena kept laughing, ignoring Eleanor.
But it's true.
They showed no sign of remorse.
I feel bad for Walter. He shouldn't be treated like that. I won't come back here anymore.
She came out of the room and saw me standing there.
I'm sorry, Walter. I don't want to believe she's my blood daughter. I don't know what went wrong with Kathy, and I don't know what to say to you.
She continued.
I won't come back here. I don't want you to take their abuse to the limit. There's a way to free yourself from it.
And with that, she left. I repeated her words to myself, free from their abuse, and I surely felt better. I didn't jump to divorce, but rather started to contemplate. Rena's graduation was approaching. One day, Rena told me abruptly,
Give me $3,000.
$3,000? What for?
It's none of your business.
I told her that I couldn't allow her to have that much money without telling me why, and she said with a sullen face,
Mom and I are going on vacation for my graduation.
I said, "You and Mom?" And she goes like,
Of course, you can house sit. And don't you ever show up at my graduation. You're my embarrassment, you know.
so she's saying I should pay for their lavish trip without me, even though they have no respect for me and think I'm an embarrassment. My daughter doesn't even want me to be at her graduation. Who in their right mind could take this anymore? So I refused it.
You're the worst dad. You go to hell.
I just ignored her. We didn't speak to each other for a week. On payday, I deposited some money into my savings account as usual and noticed the balance had gone down. A close look showed that about $3,000 had been withdrawn a few days before. I asked Kathy about it, and she said with a straight face,
I used it for the graduation trip for Rena and I.
"This is my savings account. You had no right to withdraw that much," I said clearly. And then she got angry.
Are you saying Rena doesn't deserve a graduation present? I won't buy any souvenirs for you. You should shut up and just support us as long as we live.
Listening in, Rena laughed and cheered.
I need $1,000 allowance for the trip.
At that moment, my patience for all these years crumbled. I just left there and went to my bedroom and called the office. There was an overseas position available, which I had turned down once, but I told them I changed my mind. Then I filed for a divorce without telling them. On the day of Rena's graduation ceremony, they were excited about the day.
Don't forget, don't you show up, Mr. Embarrassment.
She left the house emphasizing that. From this point on, I acted fast. I loaded my loosely packed stuff into my car, then left the house and headed to a hotel. I got a few messages from Kathy, who got back home in the afternoon, but I had nothing to say to her and just ignored them. Communication was done through my attorney ever since. A few days later, he said Kathy wanted to meet with me, so I reluctantly agreed. We met at the hotel lobby in the presence of the lawyer. Kathy saw me and said,
He says the divorce is finalized, but is that true? I won't agree to it, ever.
But the divorce was, in fact, finalized, and there was nothing she could do about it. She collapsed to her knees on the floor.
I can't believe this.
I said, "You should have thought about that before treating me like dirt."
You sold that house, didn't you? The realtor came by and told us to empty the house. Where would we go? I told Mom about the divorce, but she wouldn't take us in.
She looked desperate. I said, "I got an overseas position and I'm leaving the country soon. That's why I sold the house. I'm the owner of the house and I can do whatever I want with it."
What? Are you going abroad? How would we live without you?
I told her that's not my concern. She yelled at me to demand child support, but she was the one who threatened to divorce me for all these years. If she demands child support, I said I would put all of their moral harassment on the table and demand compensation.
I won't ask you anymore, you bastard.
And she left. They moved into a shabby apartment. Reno was going to go to high school, but gave up and worked instead. The two worked to make ends meet, but were beginning to realize the difference between their current life and what they had taken for granted for years. I heard Kathy is getting mentally unstable. Rena blamed her giving up on high school on Kathy and called me up.
I want to live with you, Dad.
But I'm dirty and an embarrassment. Who do you think wants to live with somebody with such a vulgar mouth? Then she apologized for her attitude. I said that I'd accept apologies, but I don't intend to help them. Then she yelled at me again like old times and never called me back. I moved on with my life and started anew in a foreign branch. I made a few friends and got used to life there. I hardly looked back. I left my dark years behind and am enjoying my new life in a new land.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.